NASCAR announces no penalties for RFK and Team Penske after wheels have been confiscated. The Daytona 500 TV ratings have officially been revealed, and NASCAR talks about the future TV deal that could be coming very, very soon. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to another video. We've got a ton of NASCAR stories and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to go ahead and start with the paint schemes and sponsorship news. Let's jump into those really quickly first. The paint schemes we're taking a look at first is Daniel Hemrick's 2022 Poppy Bank schemes that we're going to see this weekend at Auto Club and multiple races throughout the season. I love these paint schemes. They look really cool. I like the change from when they had it at Joe Gibbs Racing to here. I like the black and the orange contrast. I think that's something that's really cool, and I'm looking forward to see these paint schemes out on the racetrack this weekend at Auto Club. The next paint schemes we're taking a look at is Chase Briscoe's 2022 Production Alliance schemes that we are going to see this weekend here in the Cup Series race at Auto Club Speedway. I like these paint schemes a lot. I mean, they're kind of bare, don't get me wrong, but I actually do like these paint schemes a lot. They look pretty cool, and they're pretty good paint schemes, and I'm looking forward to seeing them on the racetrack as well this weekend. The next paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Austin Dillon's 2022 Bear Dow scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Auto Club. Love this paint scheme a lot. Love the color contrast on it. Also like where the logos are. Numbers in a good position. I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend. The next paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Tyler Reddick's 2022 Low Nova scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Auto Club. Not as a big fan of this paint scheme. It's not a bad looking paint scheme, don't get me wrong, but they don't use sponsorship utilization as well as they do for Austin Dillon's scheme. But it's not a terrible scheme, but I'm not overall the biggest fan of this scheme, to be honest with you. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Kyle Weatherman's 2022 Pure California scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Auto Club. I'm not overall a big fan of this paint scheme either, to be honest with you. The colors don't really work too well for me. I think it's a little bit all over the place. It's cool to see that Kyle Weatherman does have another sponsor, but I think this paint scheme is a little bit all over the place. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Bubba Wallace's 2022 Wheaties scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Auto Club. I think this paint scheme's all right, to be honest with you. It's okay. It's not my favorite Bubba Wallace scheme I've seen so far. I do think Wheaties does an okay job when it comes to sponsor utilization, but I'm also not a big fan of the color contrast on the car. I'm just not overall the biggest fan of the scheme. It's probably my least favorite one that's come out so far from the 2311 camp at this point. The next paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Austin Dillon's 2022 Breast Tree scheme that I think we're going to see at Vegas and a couple other races this year. I like this paint scheme a lot. Colors in a really good position. Also, numbers in a good position like it usually is. I think it's a good paint scheme, and I'm looking forward to seeing on racetrack this year. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Jeffrey Earnhardt's 2022 Fine Hope Forever launch scheme that we're going to see, I believe, this weekend at Auto Club. Decent paint scheme, in my opinion. Colors in a good position. Like it a lot. Not much to say here. It's a good paint scheme. Looking forward to seeing on racetrack this weekend at Auto Club, and good to see he's got a sponsor as well. The next paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Austin Cindric's 2022 Keystone Light scheme that we're going to see in the All-Stars. I love this paint scheme. The colors are very perfect. The number, again, is in a really good position. Sponsor utilization is in a really good place. And the number, like I said, is in a good position. Love this paint scheme a lot. Look forward to seeing on the racetrack at the All-Stars. The next paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Landon Castle's 2020 USIO scheme that we're going to see at Texas and COTA later this year. Paint scheme's all right in my opinion. I do like that the new sponsors working with Landon Castle besides the one he usually has, the Voyager scheme that he's going to have most of the year. It's cool to see he's going to have another sponsor work with them this year. Good paint scheme and not terrible, but we'll see how good it is this week and see how good it does throughout this year. The next paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Martin Truex Jr.'s 2022 Riser Fine Food scheme that we're going to see in 3 races this year. Also, Riser's announced a major extension with Joe Gibbs Racing for multiple years. They'll sponsor him this week at Auto Club, Worldwide Technology Raceway, and then we'll also sponsor him, I believe, later this year at Watkins Glen. Paint scheme, I'm not overall the biggest fan of it. I don't know why they had to add the blue streak on it. I think the car looked really good. The pre-ramped run looked much better than this one. I'm not a big fan of this paint scheme, to be honest with you. The next paint schemes we're taking a look at is Chase Briscoe and Eric Almirola's 2022 Rush Truck Center schemes that we're going to see throughout the season later this year. These paint schemes are cool in my opinion. I love that they have a lot of different wacky colors. I really like that a lot. And it's cool to see the Rush Truck Centers continues to have partnership with Stewart-Haas Racing. The next paint schemes we're taking a look at is Landon Castle's 2020 Car Anomaly scheme that we're going to see later this year. I believe in the Cup Series or the Xfinity Series. Cool paint scheme, in my opinion. Again, really cool to see that another sponsor is working with Landon Castle. Love the cars a lot. Did a good job on this paint scheme. The next paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Austin's 2022 Quaker State Menard scheme that we're going to see later this season. Overall, decent paint scheme, in my opinion. I think the sponsor does a really good job. I think it's cool to see that Quaker State is continuing to have a really good partnership with Team Penske, in my opinion. Next paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Corey LaJoie's 2022 General Formulation scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Auto Club. Like it a lot. Sponsorization is really, really good. The colors look very, very well. Number X is in a good position. They did a really good job, and I'm looking forward to see us on a racetrack this weekend at Auto Club. The next paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Ross Chassain's 2022 Casa del Sol Whiskey scheme that we're seeing this weekend. I love this paint scheme a lot. The black and white work very, very well. The white number and the black background. Really, really love this a lot, and I'm happy to see this paint scheme is going to be on the racetrack this weekend. The next paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Cole Custer's 2022 Production Alliance scheme that we're going to see in the Xfinity Series race at Auto Club Speedway. He will be racing in the Xfinity Series race. Unlike the Cup Series one, I think that one is actually a little bit better, to be honest with you. I think they do a much better job on this one, and it does a really good sponsorization, in my opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Alex Abay's 2022 Southwest Style Service scheme that we are going to see this weekend in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Auto Club. This paint scheme is decent in my opinion. I think it's also just really, really cool to see the Southwest site is stepping up and sponsoring Alex Abay so he can continue to run in the Xfinity Series here this year. The next paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Spencer Boyd's 2022 Montucky scheme that we're going to see in multiple races in the Truck Series in 2022. I like it in my opinion. They do a good job on it. It's cool to see that another sponsor is once again working with Spencer Boyd this year in 2022. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Jeremy Clements' 2020 First Pacific Union scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Auto Club. I love this a lot. I've been a big fan of the First Pacific Union schemes throughout the years. This one is no exception. They do a really good job on it, and I'm looking forward to see it on the racetrack as well in 2022. Next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ty Dillon's 2022 Allegiant Airlines scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Auto Club. I love this paint scheme a lot. I love the sponsorship utilization. The numbers in a great position. The colors work very, very well. They do a really good job on this paint scheme. I'm looking forward to see it on the racetrack as well. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Ellis's 2022 Ford Locos USA scheme that we're going to see at Las Vegas. One of my favorite sponsor reveals that has come out so far. They do a really good job on it. I love this paint scheme a lot, and I'm happy to see it will be on the racetrack in 2022 as well. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Trevor Bayne's 2020 Devotion Nutrition scheme that we're going to see throughout the year in 2022. Of course, Trevor Bayne is making his return for the NASCAR Xfinity Series this year. Really cool paint scheme in my opinion. I love the sponsorization. I love it a lot. Really good looking paint scheme. I'm happy to see that they are stepping up and sponsoring in 2022 as well. The next paint scheme we are going ahead and take a look at is JGLA's 2022 Hex scheme that we're going to see in the Xfinity Series race this weekend at Auto Club. Of course, you've already seen the scheme in the Cup Series, but it'll run this in the Xfinity Series. I love this paint scheme a lot. I love how wacky the colors are. It's one of my favorite things about this paint scheme, and I'm looking forward to seeing a racetrack this weekend at Auto Club. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Josh Williams' 2022 American Iron Rental scheme that we're seeing this weekend at Auto Club. Different than the alley colors they have, but I will say that it's actually a really good looking paint scheme, and I'm very excited to see on the racetrack in 2022 as well. And the final paint scheme that we're taking a look at as of now is Brandon Jones' 2020 Patriot Lightning Menard scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Auto Club in the Xfinity Series. Good paint scheme, in my opinion. Good sponsorship utilization. Colors work very, very well. Very excited about that, and I'm glad to see that they have gone ahead and they're going to sponsor this year, to be honest with you. I'm glad to see that that is a paint scheme that we're going to see. I love that, and they did a really good job on it, and I'm very excited to see that that's going to be a paint scheme we're going to see in 2022. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the purse money for this weekend at Auto Club, and also for the Cup Xfinity, and also for the truck purse money as well. For the Fontana Cup race, the purse money for the Cup race is going to be $8,035,061. So $8,035,061 is for the Cup. For Xfinity Series, it's going to be $1,618,853. And for the truck race at Las Vegas, the purse money for that is going to be $699,491. Now, the reason I think the Cup purse is up a lot is because of the travel they had to go all the way over from Florida all the way over to here to California. And of course, there'll be a lot more money probably coming in the early portion of the season. I think that's a really good thing that they're doing, that they're bringing more money in for the weekends. I'm glad to see that there's more money coming in. I think that's really, really awesome. It's great, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Michael Carey. As it was announced yesterday that Michael Carey has been hired by the SRX once again, and he'll be working in the social media sphere. I'm not sure if he's going to be a social media manager. I wasn't sure on that, but he will be working in SRX this year. Very happy to see that Michael Carey is joining. He's been a really good personality. He does a really good job when it comes to designing paint schemes, and also has worked for teams like TobyChristie.com in the past, and I think it's really awesome to see that Michael Carey is joining. Michael, I don't know if you watch my videos or not, man, but huge congratulations on the promotion. You deserve it, man. Huge congratulations right there, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Moonhead, also known as Travis Brown. As it was announced on Wednesday that Moonhead, also known as Travis Brown, is going to race a late model at Hickory later this year, I believe in August, for the 37 car for Huffman Racing. For those of you who do not know who Moonhead is, most of you probably know who watch my channel. Moonhead runs Mooncar, and he's got a really great personality. He's done really cool videos in the past, and the dude is one of the best online personalities when it comes to the motorsports world. So, Moonhead, congratulations, dude. You absolutely are. I think you're going to do very, very well, man. I hope you can go out there and kick some ass in your races. Congratulations, dude. You deserve it. Congratulations on getting a massive opportunity, man. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Andrew Whitworth. As Andrew Whitworth was announced on Wednesday that he will be the Grand Marshal for the Wise Power 400. For those of you who do not know, Andrew Whitworth, I believe, was a Super Bowl MVP. I believe he's also an OT for the Los Angeles Rams. He's been playing with the Rams for a very, very long time, and really a really good OT. I think Andrew Whitworth will give a really, really good command. We had Charles Woodson give a great command for the 500. Andrew Whitworth has a lot of energy and excitement around him. I know there's talk maybe he will retire from the NFL at the conclusion of the season, but it's cool to see that Andrew Whitworth is going to be the Grand Marshal. I think he'll do a really, really good job, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Albert Pujols. As Albert Pujols is going to be the pace car driver for this weekend's Wise Power 400. Albert Pujols, in my opinion, is one of the greatest MLB players of all time. Of course, he played for the St. Louis Cardinals for many years, from 2001 to 2011. And from 2012 to 2021, I believe, he played for the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, and then went over to the Los Angeles Dodgers, which I believe he's retiring at this point from the MLB. Albert Pujols is, like I said, one of the greatest players of all time and one of the greatest players of my generation. And I think it's so cool and very awesome to see that Albert Pujols is getting involved, and I'm happy to see that he will be joining and doing some pace car driving this year, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Jimmie Johnson. As it was announced this morning that Jimmie Johnson has become a brand ambassador for CBDMD, and this will tout product for his need of muscle recovery throughout the season. For those who don't know much about CBD, CBD oil, not Delta 8 and that stuff, but CBD oil is a very good thing that can calm you and relax you and can help with stress and anxiety. So Jimmie Johnson is getting involved with something that I think that's really, really awesome. And again, I think that's very, very cool to see that Jimmie Johnson, and I never thought in my time that I'd see Jimmie Johnson get involved with CBD oils and companies, but in my opinion, I think that's a really big thumbs up, and it's cool to see that Jimmie Johnson is getting involved in that. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the ARCA East and West and Whelen Modified Tour. As was announced on Wednesday, that both of those series are going to all 22 races for all of those race series will air tape delayed on USA Network this year. Instead of track pass like they've done in the past, they will all be year tape delayed on USA. Of course, a lot of time they've been on NBCSN, but of course, NBCSN is shutting down. They're going to be tape delayed on USA this year. That's a thumbs up in my opinion. I do believe that USA does reach more viewers, if I'm not mistaken. So a major thumbs up in my opinion that they're doing that. Again, I think it will be able to reach more viewers. So a major thumbs up on that front in my opinion. Very happy to see that. And I'm glad to see that they've gone ahead and stepped up in that front, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Frankie Muniz. As Frankie Muniz has announced his 2022 schedule for this year, and he's planning this year to race in the SLR Southwest Tour, and will also race in the Irwindale Late Model Championship Series. Frankie Muniz, who's a little actor, has been on Malcolm in the Middle and multiple movies in history. And Frankie Muniz has been getting into racing a lot more. Of course, he had an ARCA test, and there had been talk maybe that he was going to field an ARCA team this year. It doesn't look like that's going to be the case, but he's looking to get a little more experience in the local levels before jumping up into ARCA. ARCA is a much different level than that, and it's cool to see that he's going into the lower ranks in the lower series, and he's trying out something really, really new. And I love that he's coming into motorsports. I think that's a thumbs up. Congratulations to Frankie Muniz on getting a really, really cool opportunity. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about SS Greenlight Racing. Now, this is reported by Casey Campbell on Wednesday, and it says that their 2022 Las Vegas lineup, according to the tentative report, that the 2022 Las Vegas lineup is going to be Joe Graf Jr. back in the 07 car, and David Starr will be in the 08 car once again. Now, this weekend, Joe Graf Jr. is going to be in the 08 car, and Cole Custer is going to be in the 07 car. This will be mainly the lineup that you're going to see most of the year, is both of those guys in that car. I think that's a big thumbs up, and I'm really, really happy to see that that's going to be the lineup. I think that's going to be the lineup pretty much most of the year, but of course, at some times there are going to be changes for that. So, in my opinion, it's cool to see, and I'm glad to see that's going to be the lineup for the next race. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jimmy Beans Racing. As Jimmy Beans Racing will not race this weekend at Auto Club, they are going to withdraw from this weekend. They originally were going to have Harrison Rose drive this car this weekend, but they will not race this weekend. And they are going to take this by a week-by-week case, week-by-week approach. This will be the first time that Jimmy Beans Racing has not raced in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in nearly a decade. The last time they did not race in the NASCAR Xfinity Series was 2013. And I do think a lot of that has to do with a lot of issues when it comes to sponsorship. Now, Jimmy Beans Racing does not have a lot of funding behind it, and they're not overall a very fast organization. That is no disrespect to Jimmy Beans Racing, but they don't have a lot of money in funding behind them right now, which is probably why they decided to not race this weekend. So it's unfortunate they're not going to show up. It would have been cool to see Harrison Rhodes back in the car, but it's an unfortunate situation, and we will not see Jimmy Beans Racing this weekend at Auto Club. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Medallion Financial. This is reported on Wednesday by Bob Pogers, and it says that in earnings report, Medallion Financial states that the company sold a legacy investment, its NASCAR race team, for again of $0.7 million. I think it was 10.7. I'm not sure if that was right, but the sale increased tangible book value by $26.2 million. GMS paid $19.1 million plus assumed debts for the organization to join in. For those of you who have been paying attention, of course, we saw the merger of Petty GMS Motorsports, but Richard Petty Motorsports shut down and basically became a multi-organization. Now, of course, we know what's going on with the guy who owns the company, Andrew Mercy. He's been known to kind of be a little bit questionable, and he's been involved in a lot of other things and have been questionable. I think this is a very, very important story to be been following. We've been following a story for the last couple months with the major merger that happened, one of the biggest stories, I think probably one of the top 2 or 3 biggest stories of the offseason that overall took place. So I think it's very interesting that that's how much money they basically gave to them. It's definitely interesting in my opinion and pretty crazy to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Brennan Poole. As Brennan Poole is going to drive the 47 for Mike Harmon Racing this weekend at Auto Club. Brennan Poole, for those who don't know, was a former development driver for Chip Ganassi Racing from around 2015 to 2017. But over the last couple years, since not racing with Chip Ganassi Racing Xfinity, he has been racing in other forms of racing, including also in the Truck Series for the last couple of years, where he had pretty successful and also raced in the Cup Series in 2019 or 2020 as well, but has not raced in there ever since. And he had one start in 2021 for the 30 team of On Point Motorsports, but this will be his first start of 2022. And this will, I believe, be the first time that Brennan Poole has raced in the NASCAR Xfinity Series since 2017. Brennan Poole is a very, very talented driver. Now, the thing about the 47 car is this car is going to have to really work a bit well because this 47 car does not have a lot of owner's points, and the 47 car did not have a lot of pace. Now, of course, it'll have to be 3 or 4 cars to be able to make it into the show because, again, we've only got 3 cars that are going home because you have the 90 team that's withdrawn and, of course, the 52 team that's withdrawn, but I've not been really impressed by that speed. But I think it's really cool to see that Brennan Poole is back. I'm very excited about that. And again, I think it's really awesome that Brennan Poole is coming back this year. I'm very happy about that. I'm glad to see that he is coming back this weekend here at Auto Club. I hope he gets to run more races with this team. I think it'd be cool to have him in more races this year. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Maya Snyder. As it was announced on Tuesday that Maya Snyder has been cleared as expected by doctors in NASCAR to race at Fontana this weekend. And he has a sore left foot after his NASCAR crash Saturday night, but he's been cleared to race. I am so happy that he is back racing. For those who do not know, did not watch the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, on the last lap of the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Daytona International Speedway, he was involved in a very, very nasty accident where he went up into the catch fence and he had the engine to go out. The engine went into 2311's basically hauler, and we saw a massive, massive accident take place. The fact that Maya Snyder was basically almost perfectly okay, even though he did get injured a little bit, the fact that he was basically, after a terrible accident happened, that he's going to be able to race at Auto Club, I think that's really, really cool. And it shows that NASCAR has really gone a long way when it comes to safety. I'm so happy that Maya Snyder is getting back behind the wheel. The fact that he is, I think, is a really big thumbs up. And I'm glad to see that Maya Snyder is going to be back behind the wheel this weekend at Auto Club. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Maurice Hasemans. As Maurice Hasemans, as reported by the Jacques Villeneuve news team, that Maurice Hasemans is expected to make his Cup Series debut this week, and not next week, but later this year at Circuit of the Americas, driving the number 27 for Team Haysbert. Team Haysbert this year is expected to run a majority of road course, and also a majority of short tracks this year as well, with potentially a couple other races that are sprinkled throughout this year. They did actually race in the Daytona 500. They actually ended up finishing 23rd. A funny thing, Jacques Villeneuve is actually in 23rd in the points and despite only making one start. Now, Maurice Hasemans, of course, is a Wheel and Euro Series champion, so he's, I think, got a good shot to run well. But the thing is, I'm not sure how fast this car is going to be. I don't think this car is going to be overall the fastest, but I do think Maurice Hasemans, with how much talent he has, I do think that he will be able to overcome that speed deficit that he has. So I think that's really, really awesome. And again, I'm very happy to see that Maurice Hasemans is going to be behind the wheel at Circuit of the Americas. I think that's awesome. I'm very happy to see that for sure. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Austin Cindric. Now, Austin Cindric is a story that I kind of reported that Austin Cindric is technically the first rookie to lead the NASCAR Cup Series points since, get this, Jimmie Johnson in 2002, after he won the second time we went to Dover after sweeping Dover. Jimmie Johnson led the point standings in 2002. He is only the second rookie in NASCAR history to lead the point standings. That is absolutely crazy. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, of course, you won the Daytona 500 in the first race. But the fact that a rookie has not led the points in nearly 20 years and it's only happened twice in NASCAR history, I think is absolutely impressive. Now, I expect that he is going to lose the points. He is tied with Brad Keselowski, but some people say, well, Brad Keselowski is technically tied for the points lead. Well, Brad Keselowski finished worse than Austin Cindric, and the tiebreaker goes to the guy who's had the fire finish in the race, which, of course, that goes to Austin Cindric. That, I think, is absolutely crazy and awesome, the fact that Austin Cindric has now basically the points leader for the first time. He's going to probably, like I said, of course, lose the points lead here, but I think that's really, really cool to see that he is basically right now the points leader in the NASCAR Series. I think that's a pretty awesome story, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about Trevor Bayne. Now, Trevor Bayne had an interview this past week with NASCAR and NBC, and he says he has high expectations heading into 2022. Earning 3 to 5 wins in 2022 to go into victory lane in the 18 car. Now, we've talked about Trevor Bayne in this car. Trevor Bayne will be in the 18 car for 7 races this year. Now, do not get me wrong. He's got a really, really good car this year in the 18 car. He's got, I believe, Jason Ratcliffe crew chief. I believe that Jason Ratcliffe is crew chiefing that 18 car. Trevor Bayne, though, I think is really putting too many high expectations for himself. Considering Trevor Bayne is not racing the NASCAR Xfinity Series for the last couple years, I do not believe that he is going to win 3 to 5 races. I think Trevor Bayne realistically needs to be looking at a win or 2. I think 2 wins is actually pretty reasonable. But you do have to remember that the NASCAR Xfinity Series this year is much, much more stronger than past times in 2016. You don't have Cup guys in there, but you have a really, really strong field and a very competitive field. You also have Ty Gibbs, who's probably going to get more preferably than the 18 car, even though the 18 car is an all-star car. I do think that Trevor Bayne is going to run well. I think he's actually going to be much better than people are giving him credit for. But I do think that Trevor Bayne is not going to win as much as I think he thinks he's going to win. So I think Trevor Bayne's going to get a couple victories, but in my opinion, I think he's overextended himself saying 3 to 5 wins. I know it's an all-star car, don't get me wrong, but I do not believe that he will win 3 to 5 races in 2022, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Toyota and Indycar. Now, we've talked about Indycar and a potential third OEM and manufacturer many, many times on my channel. And Roger Penske, according to Adam Serv, Roger Penske has told the Associated Press Journal's Jenna Fryer that the Toyota is the car maker that is closest to joining Indycar in a third OEM. Now, if you've been paying attention inside the Indycar world, this really should not surprise you. There has been talk and discussions for a very, very long time that Toyota is the main manufacturer currently in the moment that is in talks potentially joining the IndyCar series right now as a third OEM. Now, David Wilson, of course, necessarily said no comment in regards to that situation, but you have to look at a couple major factors. Over the last offseason, a bunch of people that worked in IndyCar were hired by Toyota. Now, of course, it may be able to help the IMSA, the future LMDH program that's coming with the GTP, potentially coming with the Grand Touring Performance car that's coming in for IMSA and the change in IMSA that year. But you also have to remember and understand that when you hire a bunch of people for IndyCar, that really tells me that they're looking at IndyCar program. Now, of course, Toyota has been an IndyCar in the past. It really should not be shocking to anybody that Toyota is looking to come back to IndyCars. But again, it has been many, many years since they've come in. That being said, though, I do believe that it will be, again, I think Toyota is going to join IndyCar. I believe that they're going to join. There's talk maybe in 2 years from now, very similar to the Andretti group that's going to be joining F1. You're going to have, I think, a new manufacturer by 2024. It will probably get announced in the near future. But again, having Toyota be the lead manufacturer for IndyCar, I think potentially would be really, really awesome. And it's cool to see that they'd be expanding. They have a lot of already series that they are currently in at the moment. So in my opinion, I think that's really, really awesome. And I'm glad to see that they're potentially going to get involved in IndyCar in the future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kevin Harvick. Now, Kevin Harvick was also interviewed for This Week in the Auto Club asking what he kind of expects for Auto Club. And he said that this week's NASCAR Cup Race at Auto Club will be trial by fire for the new 18-inch wheel tires. Now, Kevin Harvick, if you did not watch the Daytona 500 and really watch a lot of these races, there have been multiple tire failures that have happened on these cars. Now, compared to Daytona, Auto Club puts a lot more load on these tires compared to track like Daytona. And even Daytona, which doesn't have as much load, you saw a lot of tire failures took place where 3 drivers had major tire problems on the cars. Now, they have kind of updated and beefed the wheels. We'll talk about RFK and Team Penske with the wheel situation. But you have to look at the fact that this car is very, very new. And it's really, with this car, there's going to be a lot of development and stuff. One thing that I expect throughout this year is that there are, especially really I think through the majority of the year, there are going to be a lot of mechanical failures with this car. I expect that we're going to see a lot of races with attrition. I think that this weekend as well, Auto Club, for the Cup Series race, we're probably also going to see a lot of attrition as well. So I think that's absolutely nuts and absolutely crazy. And I do expect that we're going to see a lot of attrition this weekend at Auto Club with the high performance of these wheels. So I think we're going to see a lot of attrition this weekend at Auto Club. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ryan Truax. As was announced yesterday that Ryan Truax is going to drive the 18 for Joe Gibbs Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2022 for 4 races. He will drive at Las Vegas next weekend. He'll drive at Martinsville, then drive at Darlington, and then conclude at Texas in the summer. Ryan Truax, of course, is a younger brother of Martin Truex Jr., who has in the past raced in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, but this will be the second. Of course, he's driving part-time for Sam Hunt Racing right now, where I think he got a top 10 or top 15 finish for Sam Hunt Racing after qualifying horrendously. This is a really, really good opportunity for Ryan Truax. Now, a lot of people bring up the fact that he really did not have a lot of success with Joe Gibbs Racing in 2011 or 2012. You have to remember that was a series he had a lot of Cup guys in, and he nearly won a Cup Series, Xfinity Series race in 2012 at Dover. Then people bring up his lack of success with Kaulig Racing. We have to remember that Kaulig Racing in 2017 and 2018 was a much different team than they are in 2020, 2021, and they weren't as good back then. And then people bring up this lack of speed at Nice Motorsports. Well, one, Nice Motorsports had 4 trucks. I'm not trying to make excuses for Ryan Truax here, but Ryan Truax kind of has a lot of excuses for struggling a little bit. Now, looking at Ryan Truax here, I think Ryan Truax, this is a good opportunity for him. I think that Ryan Truax actually will be very, very competitive here. I think he actually will contend for victories. I think he could get a win here in that 18 car. I could be wrong, but I think he could win in the 18 car this year. But again, I do think this is a very, very awesome and a really awesome opportunity for Ryan Truax, and I do believe that Ryan Truax will be very, very competitive this weekend. Good luck to Ryan Truax, and I'm very happy to see he's getting an opportunity. I do think that Ryan Truax could win a couple races this year in that 18 car, but again, he's got a lot of competition, so like I mentioned with Trevor Bayne, so we'll have to wait and see what happens, but I do believe that he will be very, very competitive, and I think he'll be very, very fast this year, so very happy to see that in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about onboard cameras. Now, Steve Phelps, we'll get into talking about the new TV deal here and future of that in just a little bit. But Steve Phelps was also talking about onboard cameras. And he predicts that every Cup car will be equipped with an onboard camera by the playoffs this year or in the new future TV deal. This is very, very huge when it comes to onboard cameras. And this is something that's needed to be done, in my opinion, for a very, very long time. They only tend to give out a few onboard cameras for these cars, but I think having onboard cameras can really give a new perspective for the broadcast, considering broadcasting has been a major, major struggle over the last few years. I think having an onboard camera for these races, I think would be a major, major thumbs up. And again, the fact that they're looking at having onboard cameras, but I don't know if it's for this playoffs or when it comes to the new TV deal. I'm not entirely sure on that. But I think it's really, really cool they're looking at adding onboard cameras. I think that's something that is really, really important when it comes to the future of broadcasting. And I do really hope that we get to see onboard broadcasts. I think it needs to happen by this time when we get to playoffs. But I think it's really, really awesome and really, really cool. And it's good to see that they're looking at that for the future when it comes to onboard cameras. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kaz Grala and Justin Haley. Now, we'll get into RFK and Team Penske when it comes to their situation penalties, but Kaz Grala and Justin Haley of the teams of Kaz Grala and Justin Haley were hit by penalties for losing wheels in Daytona 500. Crew chiefs plus 2 additional crew members have been suspended for the next 4 races. That, of course, meaning that Trent Owens has suspended and Tony Eury Jr. has been suspended for the next 4 races. Now, all these people can, if they ran in the Xfinity Series stuff, that's when they can start suspension. So Trent Owens can get back much sooner. And Tony Eury Jr., if he crew chiefs for like a smaller Xfinity Series team, which he doesn't right now, he won't be on the crew chief box. I mean, someone from the money team will have to show up. I agree with giving Kaz Grala's team a penalty. That was a lot of inexperience for the organization and for the team. Of course, a lot of that is with the Starcom guy. A lot of Starcoms are working at the money team right now, so that's why they had a lot of inexperience. And that one, I understand giving them that penalty. I do not understand Justin Haley's team getting a penalty. I don't think that that's fair that the 31 team, though, is getting a major, major penalty. And here's why I'm saying this. The 31 team, they didn't really lose the whole entire wheel. They only lose the outer stuff of the wheel. They did not lose the inner liners and all that stuff inside the wheel. So, in my opinion, I understand giving Kaz Grala a penalty and their team a penalty. I think that's justified. I do not understand giving a 31 team a penalty. I do not personally think that's a very, very justified reason to give them a penalty. I think it's a bad penalty call, in my honest opinion. I think it's a really, really bad call, but it is NASCAR decision if they want to go ahead and give out those penalties. Again, it's NASCAR decision if they want to do it. So, in my opinion, it's a bad call, but again, it's NASCAR decision if they want to do that, in my opinion. I think it's NASCAR decision. It is what it is. So, that's really unfortunate they decided to give out a penalty, but again, it is NASCAR decision what they want to do, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Russian Grand Prix. Now, there's been a lot of up in there in regards to the future of the Russian Grand Prix. We'll talk about why in a second. But the Russian Grand Prix has been announced this morning that the Russian Grand Prix will not happen in 2022. A place-in race has not been announced at this time, but there will not be a Russian Grand Prix in the 2022 season. Now, for those who have not been following the reason why the Russian Grand Prix is not going to happen this year, the big reason is one, there's been a lot of drivers have been protesting. Why? Because there is a war going on currently in Ukraine. Russia invaded Ukraine on Wednesday evening, and there's been and the United States and all other countries have stopped sanctions on basically the dollar bills and all the kind of currency that the Russians have currently due to the invasion in Ukraine right now. We're seeing a lot of cancellations for all major events. The UEFA, I think, for the Champions League in Russia, that's already been canceled, and now the Russian Grand Prix has been canceled. In my opinion, a very, very good decision. I know the race is not till September, but in my opinion, I think it's a really, really good decision that they decided to cancel that. Another big question is the future of Nikita Mazepin. Now, this is another story we're going to talk about is Haas and Yurkalel. Now, Yurkalel has been sponsoring Haas for the last year or so. While they dropped Yurkalel off of the Haas branding, and not just on the car, but also on the hauler as well that carries that car. And the reason is because Nikita Mazepin's father, Dmitry Mazepin, owns a company, and he technically, I believe, is an oligarch in the Russian government right now. And of course, everyone's trying to distance themselves from Russia at the moment. And that becomes a major, major question for the future of Nikita Mazepin. Now, they kind of want to sort out the situation with sponsorship. From what I know, they're trying to sort out sponsorship from Haas right now. But I think his future really is up in question right now. And if he does lose his ride with Haas in the future here very, very soon, I think that the easiest thing they can do is get their reserve driver from Pietro Fittipaldi. That would be the guy that I think they would go in reserve for them. I know people bring up Andretti being one that I've heard. Andretti has been rumored in that question. But I do believe that if they do go ahead and Nikita Mazepin leaves, I think the easiest thing they can do is get Pietro Fittipaldi. And another big question is what race is going to replace the Russian Grand Prix? I think this is a very, very simple and easy answer. The race that I think that's going to replace the Russian Grand Prix, I believe, is going to be the Turkish GP. I think the Turkish Grand Prix is going to be their race that goes ahead and replaces the Russian Grand Prix. So it is an unfortunate situation. I do feel bad for some of the people of Russia, because I think a lot of people in Russia, some people in Russia really don't want this, but whatever's happening in Russia is a very, very dangerous and serious situation, and I want to send my prayers and condolences out to the people of Ukraine during this tragic time at this given moment. And now we're going to jump on to the next stories of today's episode, as we are going to now go ahead and talk about SRX's lineups that they have announced. Now, over the last couple of days, the SRX has been announcing not only their IndyCar lineup, but the NASCAR drivers that they haven't announced for the series. Now, for the IndyCar lineup, these are the drivers that are going to race in the from IndyCar. So, Paul Tracy, Marco Andretti, and Ryan Hunter-Reay are all going to run all 6 races. Marco Andretti and Paul Tracy did race in the SRX on a full-time basis last year. And Ryan Hunter-Reay, who raced full-time in IndyCar last year, will be joining on a full-time basis this season. Cool to see Ryan Hunter-Reay is getting in there. There's talk he could run parts in IndyCar this year, but he will join from that. Tony Kanaan is going to run every single race, but Safford, I do believe that is due to the fact of running an IndyCar race maybe later that year, if I'm not mistaken, or running in Brazil. Julio Castroneves is only going to run 3 races here for South Boston, Stafford, and Nashville. That's because Julio Castroneves is committed full-time to IndyCar this year. Ernie Francis Jr. is only going to run at 5 Flags in South Boston. Ernie Francis Jr. really was a breakout star from the series last year. He will run at only 2 races, and that is due to his commitment with Team Penske in the Indy Lights series this year, or in USA 200. I think it's the Indy Lights, if I'm not mistaken. And then you're going to have Joseph Newgarden, who's only racing in Nashville. So they've got 2 new people coming in. Joseph Newgarden, of course, a 2-time IndyCar champion. I think having him in the series, I think is really, really awesome. And, of course, having Ryan Hunter-Reay join on a full-time basis, I think is very, very awesome. I'm glad to see those guys are joining. For the NASCAR lineup, there were 4 drivers that were announced at the time. We'll talk about Tony Stewart in a second. But, so the 4 drivers that are, so we have 3 that are returning. Greg Biffle, who was a standout star in the SRX, who just ran the Daytona 500 this past year, made his first Cup start since 2016. He will be racing in full-time. Bobby Labonte's returning to the SRX. He had a couple really, really strong runs in the SRX last year. And Michael Waltrip is coming back to run the SRX as well. And joining the SRX on a full-time basis this year, we've got former Roush Fenway Racing driver, RFK Racing driver, Ryan Newman joining the SRX on a full-time basis. The Rocky Man is back. And let's talk about potential competitivity for Ryan Newman for a second. Ryan Newman, I think in all seriousness, does have a very, very strong and a very, very good shot to contend for the overall championship in the SRX this season. Now, there are more drivers that are going to be announced in the future for the SRX on what drivers are going to run. There's apparently potentially a 13th car that could show up. I think there need to be more than 13 cars. I think there needs to be a lot more cars than 12. I think it needs to be 20 cars, in my opinion. I think they need to increase size of field for IndyCars for the SRX. But I think that they're having a really strong lineup, and drivers, of course, have been racing very recently. We know that Bobby Labonte's been involved with the Whelen Modified Tour, the Southern Whelen Modified Tour at this point. We also know that Ryan Newman's also currently been involved in doing some other forms of racing. But I think that these lineups are really, really cool. Now, Tony Stewart, they did not mention him. I'm not sure if Tony Stewart will be in doing as much SRX this year because, of course, he's got to focus on his NHRA team and other things as well. So, really awesome to see that the SRX is getting all these groups in. I think it's really, really awesome. I'm glad to see that the SRX is going to have Ryan Newman in the series and more drivers in the series as well, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the first of 3 major stories in today's episode, as we're going to talk about NASCAR's next TV deal. Now, Steve Phelps was getting interviewed by John Hourman and Andrew Markin to do the Sports Business Journal podcast, and he was asked about the future of TV. And Steve Phelps tells John Hourman and Andrew Markin that NASCAR's next TV deal will most likely be 8 to 10 years in length, and that having a major chunk of the season on regular TV is an important part of what they are looking for. Now, let's talk about both points. I agree with one of the things, and I don't 100% agree with one of them. Let's talk about the thing I 100% agree with. Let's talk about how having most races on broadcast TV, trying to get it on more eyes. In my personal opinion, especially for the Cup Series, I think most, if not all, Cup Series races should be on main TV broadcast. I think every event should be on main broadcast, except maybe the All-Star race and maybe the Busch Clash or maybe a couple of the qualifying races as well. But other than that, every race should be on broadcast. You can reach more TV audiences and can really, really help the ratings. There are more races this year on broadcast for the first since 2009. You have more races on broadcast this year, which I think will help with the increase in the ratings throughout the entire year, because again, there's more races on broadcast this year, and there are more audience on USA Network, though a lot of people don't really know what USA Network is. But that's one thing that absolutely needs to happen, is there needs to be a major increase how many races are on broadcast. I think the goal, especially going into next year in the future, is I think at least minimum 2/3 of the races. But if I had the choice, I put every single Cup Series race on main broadcast for Fox or whatever the broadcast deals will go into. So we'll talk about the companies and stuff that I think should get in. But the other one, let's talk about the thing I don't agree with, is the 8 to 10 year deal. Now, unless they can negotiate and change the terms throughout the contract. I'm not a big fan of an 8 to 10 year deal. And the reason I'm not a really big fan of him having an 8 to 10 year deal for the contract is because of the fact that the social media game landscape and the TV landscape is going to change. NASCAR right now is stuck in 2020, is unfortunately stuck in the 2012 era when they're back in 2012. And NASCAR is way behind at times. Their TV model right now and their business model when it comes to the TV side of things is really outdated. And unfortunately, one thing, because again, when they do get to the TV contracts, again, they're saying it's going to heat up in 2023 when it comes to the new TV deal. And they also did mention that as well. We'll talk about why the ratings are so important. But Steve Phelps said, like I said basically having 8-10 years old. I'm not a really big fan of them having an 8 to 10 year deal just because of the fact that the landscape is going to change. There's already multiverses coming in. There's social media platforms that are coming in. And the landscape is absolutely changing as we speak. And there's a lot of programs that are being developed currently behind the scenes right now in the landscape of the online presence right now. So I'm not a big fan of having an 8 to 10 year deal right now. I think it should only be at maximum 8 years. I think it should be 6 to 8 years. And unless, of course, they can be able to change throughout the contract, then maybe you can get away with having an 8 to 10 year deal. But I understand stability, but at the same time, I don't understand them having an 8 to 10 year deal. Now, another big thing is that they're saying that contract costs are going to really upbring in 2023. And the question is, what networks are going to be added? Are we going to keep the same networks of Fox and NBC, or are we going to change it up? Now, I think there are going to be 4 or 5 big networks that are going to be involved. Of course, the 2 big networks that we got right now, Fox and NBC, I think are going to be 2, of course, of the big networks that are going to be involved in the TV talks. Fox has had a contract NASCAR since 2001 when they announced back in 99. So they've had kind of a technically contract deal since like 99, but they really started broadcasting in 2001. But I think that they will be involved with that. And of course, NBC's been part of NASCAR, had multiple times they were part of NASCAR. They were part of the original deal back. I think they had 1 or 2 races in 99 and 2000. And then, of course, in 2001 and 2006, they had a contract. Then they left NASCAR from 2007 to 2014. And then in 2015 to 2024, they have been part of NASCAR. And I look at NBC being better than Fox right now. I think NBC should say. Then there's 2 other networks that I think are going to be involved in TV talks. You're going to have, of course, CBS, who's going to be involved with the future of TV talks. CBS was part of NASCAR from like 1979 all the way up to 2000 and 2000. So I think obviously that they're going to be one of the networks that's trying to get involved. Plus, they've had more of a motorsport presence, of course, at the Asterix, and they also, of course, have other series that currently run, including Formula E right now. So I think they're going to try to increase more of that motorsports presence over the next couple of years. And the final network that I think that's going to get involved with NASCAR is ESPN. Now, ESPN currently, at the moment right now, they have been showing a little bit more NASCAR coverage. And I think that they are going to get involved with more NASCAR talks. Yes, of course, they're making more mistakes. But you're starting to notice more that they're starting to talk a lot more about NASCAR on the broadcast right now. So I do believe that they are going to be involved with those major contract talks. Now, like I mentioned, of course, if I had to choose the 2 networks we go to, I would go with either NBC or ESPN or NBC or in CBS. I think that's the only way to go. I personally do not want Fox to be back on the coverage. I know they're predicting there's going to be Fox and ESPN, which I think would be the worst outcome. No disrespect to ESPN, no disrespect to Fox, but Fox has not given 2 single craps about the coverage over the last few years. So that's something they're going to be watching is the future of the TV deal and how it goes. But I think that's a major, major story, and it was something we'll be keeping an eye on over the next couple months. And now we're going to jump on to the next major story of today's episode as we are talking about the Daytona 500 TV ratings. The Daytona 500 TV ratings come out, and they're definitely very, very interesting, but they're not overall the most positive. Adam Stern and Fox reported that Fox earned a 4.7 rating and 8.86 million viewers for Sunday's Daytona 500. This is up from past 2 years, but down from 2019, which got a 5.3 rating and 9.17 million viewers and was the most recent race without delay. It did peak at 10.57 million viewers at the Daytona 500. Now, there was another thing that was reported later, and it says the Daytona 500 appears to be the most viewed single sport event to lease of the weekend, which beating out the Olympics and the NBA All-Star Game. NASCAR notes that in 2019, the race did not go up against the Olympics, and that the 22-22 share, with a slightly different metric than rating, was up 24% from 2019. Now, talking about the Daytona 500 having less ratings, now what's so crazy about this is the fact that it had a sellout crowd and everyone was at the Daytona 500. And you had so much buzz around the Daytona 500 and social media game was up, but the TV ratings were down. Now, why do I think the TV ratings are down for the Daytona 500? Well, there are a couple major reasons for that, I believe. Number one, I think there was not as much promotion for the Daytona 500. A lot of that promotion went into the Busch Light Clash. And unfortunately, with that, because of that promotion for the Busch Light Clash, they barely promoted the Daytona 500. They did promote it from time to time, but really barely promoted the Daytona 500. And I look at another race for an example, Indianapolis 500. That race is all, I believe, is already getting promotion at this time. And we still got to think, what, 2 or 3 months of the Indy 500. So the Daytona 500 needed to get a lot more promotion. And again, they did not really at all promote a single thing for the Daytona 500 as much as they did. The other big reason, in my personal opinion, is Fox's coverage. Fox's coverage this year, and again, in all of every single race this year, not just the Daytona 500, every single race this year that was on Fox was down this year for the Daytona 500, for all Daytona weekend. It was down. And the reason, like I said, I believe, is because of the fact, again, like a promotion, but also Fox's coverage absolutely was garbage. If you watch the Fox coverage this year, I don't want to hear people saying it was good. It was not good coverage this year. And Fox has been going downhill over the last couple years. 1, too many close-up shots for the Daytona 500, and people got tired of that. And 2, especially in the first half of the Daytona 500, there was so many freaking commercials, man. It was absolutely ridiculous how many commercials were there for the Daytona 500. It was absolutely insane. Again, you don't need that many commercials. And let's talk about the landscape. Fox is using a 2002 business model, and we're not in 2002 anymore when it comes to how many commercials there were. And again, Fox has been going downhill, and they really haven't had great broadcasting. I think the guys that are doing the broadcast are doing the best job they can, but I do think that was one other big reason why the ratings are down. That being said, though, there is a positive to this when it comes to the TV ratings, when it comes to NASCAR beating the Olympics and the All-Star Game. Now, of course, it is the closing ceremonies, don't get me wrong, but still, that is at least a positive right there that the Olympics, again, it is a positive right there that it did beat the Olympics, at least in their closing ceremonies. It's not been done for, but also the NBA All-Star Game. But you do have to remember, and I think I noticed too, is that the Olympics and sports in general for that day were really, really down. The NBA All-Star Game did not get as good a ratings as it had in the past. In NASCAR, beat it by, I think, 41% this year. And also, of course, the Olympics, it beat the Olympics for the first time, I think, ever. So that's a positive right there. And having more of a share, I think that's a good thing. More of a share, 24% up in the share, so more people watching from TV. It is a thing that's interesting, too, is, again, you did have more people that watched from home. Again, having 10.5 million viewers is a positive, but at the same time, having the ratings go down for the 500 is not as good. And one thing that is really, really important when it comes to the future, really why this is so important, why we're talking ratings much, people saying, why are we talking about it as much? Well, the reason is because, again, that TV deal we just talked about, the future of the TV contracts in the future, that's going to be something that's really, really important. So, in my personal opinion, there's a positiveness and also negativeness. And so far, the average, at least, I think is, 7.93. So, at least the average is already going to be better. And I expect the ratings overall to be higher this year. We're going to have to wait and see. And another thing I wish they would have been done, I know people are going to think I'm crazy with this, they should have released a Race Bubba Wallace documentary the week of the 500 instead of the week after the Daytona 500. I think we could have got more viewers from that with the Netflix documentary. So the Bubba Wallace documentary, by the way, go check out the Bubba Wallace documentary. I think it's a really, really awesome documentary, by the way. But I think when it comes to the Daytona 500 TV ratings and all that stuff, there are things that absolutely could have been fixed and absolutely changed. So in my opinion, there's a positiveness, but also negativeness in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final major stories of today's episode as we are talking about RFK and Team Penske. Now, we talked about this a couple of days ago about potential penalties that are coming for RFK and Team Penske, because remember, on Friday, NASCAR confiscated the wheels for Team Penske and RFK after the duels took place. Well, NASCAR decided to make a decision in regards to RFK and Team Penske, and they are taking no penalties. There's no action for RFK and Team Penske after they modified their wheels. There is no penalties coming for RFK and Team Penske due to, I guess they can basically convince NASCAR enough that they were actually doing it for a safety reason. NASCAR says it met with next-gen suppliers and teams to discuss the wheels, then made small adjustments to increase the upper tolerance on pins and pilot boards for Fontana, and most of the teams in NASCAR completely agreed that they did not really basically do it on purpose, and they did it, I guess, for a safety reason. I do think a lot of that decision did help from the fact that we did see a couple major tire failures, and what they were doing, it was for a safety reason, and then they realized that it really wasn't going to adjust the pit stops. Now, I'll be honest with you, I'm definitely shocked that NASCAR did not even at least give them a small penalty. I'm surprised they gave them no penalty at all, because it is in the rules. If you cannot modify these wheels at all. You're not supposed to modify these parts. So it looks like there was at least a little bit of innovation that is in NASCAR, but in my opinion, I'm definitely surprised they didn't. But I do agree with a lot of people. I really agree with the decision to not penalize him, but I am definitely surprised they decided not to penalize him because it's in the rules and it would have been an L3 penalty. But I guess NASCAR is, in my opinion, that they are being very, very more lenient as of right now. But again, I think that NASCAR will, in the future, they are going to be a little more strict when it comes to things like this. And I'm definitely surprised. But again, this next gen car is going to be a learning process. We learned after the Clash, we had transaxle issues, and NASCAR decided to go ahead and basically increase size of transaxle, increase that. We haven't really seen any major transaxle problems. And we've seen tires, which are, again, making the tires a lot more beefier. Again, like I said here a second ago, there is going to be the process for these cars, it's going to be a really long-term process for the next-gen car. And I think we're going to see a lot of mechanical failures this weekend, and we're going to see a lot of problems. And again, they're going to have to be really, I think that they're being lenient here because they did talk to teams and stuff and vendors and stuff. But I do believe that we are going to start seeing some major penalties. If teams start messing with these cars a lot, because I think that there is at least a gray area. But again, I'm very shocked that NASCAR decided to give them no penalties. I'm definitely very, very surprised. So again, I really thought, in my opinion, I really believe that they were at least going to give RFK and Team Penske at least some sort of penalties for what they did. Because again, you're not supposed to modify these wheels. I'm definitely shocked by that. I'm not mad about it. I think it's a great decision to not penalize them. But again, I'm definitely surprised, not only surprised, but I'm definitely shocked that NASCAR has gone ahead and say, hey, you know what? We're not going to go ahead and penalize him for this because we talked to our vendors and we talked to our teams and we went ahead and said, you know what? We're not going to go ahead and do that. And again, they're going to continue to have a major process. We've seen some teams agree with the decision, some teams disagree with the decision. But I think a majority of NASCAR fans are going to be a really, really happy decision. I think, again, I personally believe that I probably should have got maybe like just a fine for the situation. Don't over-penalize. I don't even give a points penalty. And especially after they just won the Daytona 500, you don't want to overall give them a major penalty. And say people, of course, are going to say, well, that they didn't penalize them because they won the 500. Maybe they would have penalized them really, really hard if they won the Daytona 500, did not win the 500, which I don't think that's really, really true at all. I do believe it was for a safety reason that they decided to do that. I was kind of thinking that too. It was really for a safety reason. But again, we weren't supposed to modify these wheels, but NASCAR is being a little bit lenient on that front. And of course, again, they won the 500, so that definitely helps their case a little bit on NASCAR being a little more lenient and not as strict about things. But I do think that they are going to be, again, I don't agree with them giving L3 penalty. I think people saying they should have gotten penalized for the playoffs was stupid. And again, I guess maybe also another major reason for that is because it was a dual race. It wasn't like a race. It was for points. I think NASCAR would have been a little more strict if it was during the 500, but it wasn't during the 500. It was during a dual race. So I guess NASCAR was being a little more lenient. So in my opinion, I think it's a really good decision that NASCAR decided to make, and I think it's a great decision. So anyway, that is today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications to be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow my Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Link description below for that, and comment your thoughts on today's video. What are your thoughts about RFK and Team Penske getting no penalties? Do you think that's a good decision or not? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about all the other stories we discussed here today on the channel? Let me know in the comments below. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.